Have you ever been watching a market just bouncing around?
Oh, yeah,
And it feels like there's no real direction.
for sure.
But you start to see
Mhm.
a few patterns emerge,
Yeah,
a few signals that maybe things are starting to point towards a
right.
more consistent trend.
Absolutely.
We've been looking at a particular digital asset lately.
Okay.
And while the daily ups and downs can be noisy,
Mm-hmm.
there are some really interesting undercurrents
I know.
suggesting we might be on the verge of some positive momentum.
It's like putting together pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah,
No single factor tells the whole story.
right.
But when you look at how different elements,
Yeah.
market behavior, policy decisions, investor actions, even public sentiment start to align, it can give you a much clearer picture of what the future might hold.
So let's get right into it.
Yeah.
What are some of those key pieces of the puzzle
Yeah.
that are suggesting this potential for upward movement?
Okay.
Let's start with what the market itself is telling us. Some of the technical patterns that analysts have been watching.
One intriguing pattern that has shown up is called a falling flag.
Okay.
Now, the name might sound a bit abstract,
Yeah.
but the idea behind it is quite intuitive.
Okay.
Imagine a price that's been generally rising,
Mm,
then it pauses and dips slightly, forming a sort of downward sloping channel. That's the flag.
okay.
The fact that it appears after an upward move
Right.
often suggests it's just a temporary consolidation
Okay.
before the original upward trend potentially continues.
Right. Like a little breather before the climb resumes.
Exactly.
And that's what we've observed recently, isn't it?
Yes.
After hitting a peak in January, there was a bit of a pullback in price.
Uh-huh.
But then around March 10th, we saw things begin to rally.
Okay.
And by March 25th,
Mhm.
it had recovered, and then some, showing a gain of around 12%.
Exactly. What's particularly interesting is that this upward move broke out of that falling flag formation. Market analysts often see this breakout
Yeah.
as a significant indication that the prior uptrend is likely to resume.
Right.
It's a pattern that's followed because historically it's been a fairly reliable predictor of continued price movement in the same direction.
And it's not just the price chart that's telling this story,
Right.
is it? The volume of trading activity seems to be supporting this idea as well.
Precisely. For a falling flag pattern to be considered more robust,
Yeah.
you ideally want to see the trading volume behave in a certain way.
Cool.
In this case, the volume pattern has been described as forming a descending rhombus shape.
Okay.
Think of it as a contracting range in trading volume, mirroring the price's sideways movement in the flag pattern.
Okay.
This narrowing suggests a buildup of energy before a potential breakout,
Right.
which we then saw on the price chart.
So it's like the market was taking a focused pause,
Yes.
and now it's gearing up for the next leg.
Exactly.
Now, shifting our focus a bit, we know that broader economic factors and government policies
Yeah,
can really steer market sentiment.
for sure.
What have we seen on that front recently?
Policy shifts can indeed have a significant impact.
Okay.
And we saw an interesting example just this past March with developments related to tariffs.
Okay.
Earlier in February, there were concerns circulating about potential new tariffs.
Yeah.
And this period coincided with price declines, not just in the crypto space,
Right.
but in traditional stock markets as well.
So it seems like those initial price dips
Yeah.
were likely tied to those wider economic uncertainties surrounding tariffs.
That appears to be the case.
Okay.
However, the narrative evolved in March.
Okay.
As reports emerged suggesting a potentially more targeted and less sweeping approach to tariffs, especially following the suspension of tariffs on some key trading partners,
Right.
we observed a positive reaction in the price of this digital asset.
Okay.
We even saw notable upward movements around March 24th and 25th.
And there were some public statements
Yes.
that seemed to support this idea of a more measured approach.
Yes.
Weren't there?
There was a quote from a key figure indicating a leaning towards a more lenient approach on tariffs,
Okay.
suggesting it might not be as strict or widespread as initially feared.
Okay.
This seemed to reassure the markets,
Right.
suggesting that the earlier price weakness was more about those overarching tariff concerns rather than a fundamental shift in the longer-term positive outlook
Okay.
for this particular digital asset.
Okay. So we're seeing positive signals from the technical charts.
Right.
And a potentially supportive shift in policy.
Yes.
What about the big players,
Okay.
the institutional investors?
Sure.
What kind of activity have they been showing?
This is another really encouraging sign.
Okay.
We've witnessed significant return of capital flowing into investment products focused on this digital asset, starting around March 14th and continuing for several consecutive days.
We're talking about substantial sums of money coming in.
Absolutely.
Wowee.
Reports indicated inflows reaching around $250 million on St. Patrick's Day.
Wow.
And then another significant inflow exceeding $200 billion the following day.
Okay.
These are considerable figures that suggest a renewed interest from larger investors.
And the way these institutions operate is often seen as a more considered and long-term perspective.
Precisely.
Right.
Compared to individual traders who might be more reactive to short-term news,
Right.
institutional investors typically conduct thorough research and have a longer investment horizon. Their increased participation and significant investments can signal a belief in the asset's sustained growth potential.
Okay.
These are regulated entities making these allocations,
Right.
which can contribute to a more stable and enduring upward trend.
It does suggest a level of confidence when these big players are moving in with significant capital.
Absolutely.
Now, let's take the pulse of public opinion. What's the general sentiment been like online and in social discussions?
We've observed a clear shift in social media sentiment.
Okay.
There's been a move away from what's commonly called FUD, which stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt,
Right.
towards FOMO, or the fear of missing out.
So the overall mood has become more optimistic and positive.
Exactly. A report from a company that analyzes blockchain data indicated on March 24th
Okay.
that the positive sentiment surrounding this digital asset had reached its highest point in 6 weeks.
Wow.
They even noted that the general tone of online discussions had become quite positive,
Okay.
with many anticipating the rally to continue.
Right.
To give you an idea,
Yeah.
earlier conversations might have focused on potential regulatory crackdowns or security vulnerabilities.
Right.
That's the FUD.
Okay.
More recently, the discussions are dominated by people talking about wanting to get in
Right.
before the price potentially goes even higher.
Yeah.
That's the FOMO.
And what could be driving this increased optimism among the broader public?
Several factors likely contribute.
Okay.
The positive price momentum itself naturally generates excitement. Additionally, there were reports of substantial purchases of this digital asset by large holders throughout March,
Okay.
which can often boost public confidence and create a sense of momentum.
So it's a bit of a snowball effect.
Right.
Positive price action and significant buying activity can fuel positive sentiment,
Yes.
which in turn can attract even more interest and potentially drive further positive price movement.
That's right.
Now, the last area we wanted to touch on is perhaps the most intriguing,
Okay.
the apparent interest from government entities.
Yes. The level of engagement and seemingly positive stance from governments has been quite noteworthy.
Yeah.
We've heard ongoing indications of a desire to provide regulatory clarity and establish a fair environment for the digital asset space to operate within.
But it seems to go beyond just statements, doesn't it? There have been hints of more concrete involvement.
There has been discussion around the possibility of governments actually acquiring and holding a significant quantity of this digital asset as part of their national reserves.
Wow.
This would represent a major evolution in how these assets are viewed.
And then there was that rather surprising suggestion from a White House official.
That's right. In late March,
Yeah.
a White House official involved in crypto policy raised the idea
Okay.
of potentially selling some of the government's gold reserves to purchase this digital asset.
That's huge.
That's a significant statement,
Yeah.
suggesting a serious consideration of this asset at a high level within the government.
That's quite a development.
Yeah.
It really highlights how this is moving from a niche technology to something being actively considered within mainstream financial and governmental frameworks.
Absolutely. This apparent embrace by a major government
Yeah.
could signal a potentially transformative shift in the long-term prospects for this digital asset, suggesting support for significant growth in the years to come.
Right.
And in the near term, further positive developments in federal policy could continue to provide upward support for the price.
Okay, so to bring it all together,
Sure.
we've looked at 5 key areas that appear to be painting a picture of potential positive momentum
Right.
for this digital asset. We've seen the bullish falling flag pattern in the technical analysis,
Mm-hmm.
the favorable impact of the evolving tariff policy, the strong return of inflows from institutional investors,
Right.
the shift from negative to positive sentiment in public opinion,
Yes.
and the increasingly apparent interest and potential involvement of government entities.
And it's important to recognize how these different elements can potentially reinforce each other.
Yeah.
For instance, positive technical signals might attract greater institutional investment.
Yeah.
A clearer regulatory landscape can boost public confidence.
Right.
And government interest could further validate the long-term potential, creating a kind of positive feedback loop.
This all leads to some really interesting questions.
Yeah.
Particularly regarding the increasing role of governments in the digital asset space. What are the broader implications if major governments start holding significant amounts of this asset?
That's a great question.
It certainly gives you a lot to consider about the evolving role of this technology in the wider financial world.
It certainly does.
Thanks for joining us today,
Thank you for having me.
and we look forward to diving deeper into this topic again soon.
Great.
Until then, be sure to keep learning and stay informed.
I will.
Have a great day.
You too.